Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with aBlogtoWatch. Please subscribe to our videos on YouTube and like this video if you find it useful. This is a review of the Bulgari Bulgari Chrono. This is the newest version for 2013 of the Bulgari Bulgari chronograph, and they just call it the Chrono now. Not sure why, but Bulgari Bulgari is a collection of Bulgari watches, and it's called Bulgari Bulgari because starting back in the 70s when these came out, it said on the bezel Bulgari and then Bulgari again, or Bulgari and Bulgari again. And that was designed by none other than Gerald Genta. So if you're a watch lover, you'll probably know who that is. And in the written review, I go into that a lot more. So I'm not going to talk to everyone about some of the history of the design. But if you're interested in that, I do discuss that more on aBlogtoWatch when this review is going to be up. Anyhow, so that's why it's called the Bulgari Bulgari. And this collection has been around for a long time. So you're probably familiar with these types of watches, but there's some new things about the chronograph, the Chrono for 2013, which I think are interesting. But let's just take a look at the overall watch itself. So Bulgari is a good watchmaker. They make some truly amazing watches, actually, in a lot of different price ranges. And this one is, of course, not a top priced one, but this is definitely a luxury watch in terms of pricing. Now, this model, unfortunately, is what they call a actually, I don't know what the exact term is, but it's a non-functioning model. So it has what's called a blocked movement. So as you can see, those hands are there and they're not moving. Why? Because Bulgari sends these out to people to take pictures, and they want to make sure that the hands are in a sexy position. So to keep it at about 10:10, they've made it so that I cannot use anything on the watch. So that has hampered my ability to test it somewhat. But the good news is that I am familiar with the movement. And so the really big news about this watch is that this is essentially a Bulgari Bulgari chronograph with a Zenith El Primero movement. Now, Bulgari doesn't call it that. I think they call it their BVL 181 automatic chronograph movement, but it's essentially a rebranded El Primero. So Zenith has been making the El Primero chronograph since the 70s, and it is a very good movement. It's a high beat movement, meaning that it operates at about 36,000 beats per hour, as opposed to the 28,800 of most. So in other terms, this would be a 5 hertz versus a 4 hertz movement. So what does that mean? Like, why does that matter to most people? Well, what it means is that theoretically the watch is going to be more accurate over time. Because it operates faster, there's less abilities for errors in the rate results to translate into inconsistencies that would make it less accurate. I know it's a little bit of a complex concept, but the faster a movement operates in terms of frequency, the more accurate it is theoretically over time. Okay. Also, for the chronograph, it allows you to measure slightly more precise fractions of a second. Again, on a watch like this, you'd have to use this outer scale here, which does not have indicators on it. And again, this is clearly going to be the more, I would say, fashionista version of the El Primero. So if you feel that the Zenith versions have a little bit, too much, kind of tool watch or not branded enough for you, if you want a big high street brand name, then this would be an interesting way. And again, there have been other watches here and there that Zenith has sold its movements to. But what's interesting is that if you don't know, Bulgari was recently acquired by LVMH, which stands for Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, which is a big luxury group which owns Zenith and also owns Bulgari. So it's kind of a parts sharing within the family, and so that's why it has that. And it doesn't say Zenith or anything like that on here, but if you are familiar with what the El Primero movements look like and you look at this, you're like, yep, that's what it is. And that makes sense. Bulgari needed a quote-unquote in-house movement, so the best thing for them to do is go ahead and borrow from Zenith, who already has a great movement. And since they're in the family, it all works out really, really well. So the chronograph is 12 hours. It's a high beats. You have the date. You have the time. This watch is 41 millimeters wide, and if you look closely, the Bulgari Bulgari case is quite fantastic if you look at the details. From the front, it just looks like a round watch, but if you look at it from the side, for example, you can see that it's slightly curved. So the entire crystal, look at that. See? Did you notice that? It's actually concave in there. That's very interesting. That's something you don't see very often. And so when you look at it from these different angles, you'll notice that the sides flare up and that there are some interesting little elements to the design that make it pretty cool. Now, so 41 millimeters is not the largest size in the world for me, but it does sit well because it is taller and you do have, you know, relatively wide lugs. This version comes on the steel bracelet. There's of course a gold version as well as a version that comes on, I think, an alligator strap or something like that. The bracelet's nice. It's original to an extent. You have these little extra cut lines here through the center link between these, what they call H links, that give it a little bit of a unique feel. It sits comfortably against the wrist, and there's a butterfly style clasp there, which I like. It should be a relatively comfortable watch. So all in all, I think this is an attractive watch. It's not radically different than the last generation Bulgari Bulgari chronograph, but this version has some tweaks to it. The size is different. I actually think the older one was a little bit larger. I think it was 42 millimeters, but older still, the chronograph was 38 millimeters. This is kind of between there. I think it's an acceptable size. I would definitely wear this, even though I tend to prefer larger chronograph watches. And you know, if you like Bulgari, you're definitely be excited about this. The dial really plays with the light well. From a darkness viewing perspective, there is lume in the hour and minute hand, but there might be some other lume there around the edges. This is not a watch that has a lot of lume, but what it does have, which is kind of cool, is the chronograph and the subdial hands have lume in there. And that's quite rare to find, actually, so that's definitely a plus factor. And I do like that, that black cabochon in the crown there, which is nice. So again, this is the Bulgari Bulgari Chrono. And it has that Zenith El Primero movement in there, which I believe they call the BVL 181. And the price for this version is $10,200, and you can see the full review on aBlogtoWatch soon.